the Siberian wall mystery right. Picture this for a moment. You're scrolling through your morning news, sipping your tea, thinking you know everything there is to know about our world. Then suddenly you stumble across something that makes you nearly choke on that cuppa. A wall. Not just any wall, mind you. A wall that's 80 times taller than the Great Wall of China, hidden away in the frozen wastelands of Siberia. Now, I know what you're thinking. Come off it. That's impossible. But here's the thing. This isn't some internet hoax or clickbait nonsense. This is real. Stone cold real. And it's about to turn everything you thought you knew about human history completely on its head. We're talking about blocks of granite, each one weighing 3,000 tons. 3,000. That's roughly the same weight as 20 blue whales stacked on top of each other. And these massive chunks of stone have been assembled with surgical precision into a wall that stretches nearly 4,000 feet into the sky. But here's where it gets proper mental. Whilst geologists are desperately trying to convince us it's all natural, there's this perfectly rectangular opening carved right into the side. A doorway, if you will, big enough for a 10-foot-tall being to casually stroll through without ducking their head. Now, pause for a second. Think about that. A doorway. Mountains don't have doorways. Natural rock formations don't come with built-in entrances. Yet here we are, staring at photographic evidence of something that should unexist according to everything we've been taught about our past. This is the story of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths, and I'm telling you now, by the time we're done here today, you're going to be questioning everything you thought you knew about who we are and where we came from. For nearly 50 years, whispers had been floating around about a mysterious city hidden somewhere in the vast expanse of Russia. Not just any city, mind you, but a city built for giants. The rumors were always centered around Siberia, that frozen wilderness where some of the world's strangest phenomena seem to occur with alarming regularity. Cast your mind back to 1908. A mysterious explosion tore through the Siberian landscape with such devastating force that it flattened 80 million trees in a matter of seconds. 80 million. The entire thing happened in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation. But here's the truly bizarre part. ... None whatsoever. Scientists scratched their heads for decades, trying to explain what could possibly cause such massive destruction without leaving behind the telltale signs of impact. Meteor strikes leave craters. Volcanic explosions leave volcanic evidence. This left nothing but questions and a landscape that looked like it had been swept clean by the hand of some cosmic giant. But sometimes, when nature reveals one mystery, it uncovers another. The explosion, devastating as it was, exposed something that would completely revolutionize our understanding of human evil. Deep within a cave system that had been sealed for millennia, researchers discovered a single toe bone. Now, I know what you're thinking. A toe bone. That's it. But this wasn't just any old bone. This tiny fragment of prehistoric remains led to one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the modern era. That toe bone belonged to an entirely unknown species of humanoid beings called the Denisovans, creatures who had been walking this earth for over 200,000 years. Think about the implications of that for a moment. An entire species of human-like beings, living, breathing, thinking, creating for hundreds of thousands of years. And we had absolutely no idea they existed. None whatsoever. If that explosion hadn't happened, if that cave hadn't been exposed, if that single toe bone hadn't been discovered, we might have gone on for centuries, perhaps millennia, never knowing that our evolutionary tree was far more complex than we'd ever imagined. This discovery opened up a rather uncomfortable question that most academics prefer not to dwell on. If we could miss an entire species for this long, what else might we have missed? What other branches of the human family tree are out there, waiting to be discovered in some remote cave or buried beneath layers of ancient sediment? The Denisovans weren't just another variation of early humans either. These beings were remarkably advanced for their time. Archaeological evidence suggests they had sophisticated tool-making abilities, complex social structures, and perhaps most remarkably, they were significantly larger than other humanoid species of their era. We're talking about beings who averaged 7 feet 10 inches in height, living in a time when most other human ancestors barely reached 5 feet tall. So when stories began filtering out of Siberia about structures that seemed too large to have been built by ordinary humans, suddenly those stories didn't seem quite so far-fetched anymore. If there had been one undiscovered species of giant humanoids, why not others? Why not entire civilizations of them? The problem was, the specific region where these alleged giant structures were located had been declared strictly off-limits to the general public. Armed guards were stationed around the perimeter, turning away curious researchers and adventurers who wanted to investigate the claims for themselves. The official explanation was environmental protection, but that didn't stop the rumors from spreading. Adding to the mystery was the sheer remoteness of the location. We're talking about a site perched on a mountain peak over 4,000 meters above sea level, accessible only by the most determined and well-equipped expeditions. The journey alone was enough to deter all but the most dedicated But in 2013, a Russian investigator named Georgy Sidorov decided he'd heard enough rumors and speculation. He was going to find out, once and for all, what was really out there in the Siberian wilderness. Sidorov assembled a team of 19 experienced researchers, equipped them with the best available climbing and surveying equipment, and set off for the remote Shoria region. What they found when they finally reached the site defied all logical explanation. The wall, if you could call it that, was absolutely massive. Not just tall, but impossibly, incomprehensibly massive. Individual blocks, each one measuring 20 meters in length and 6 meters in height, had been stacked with precision that would make modern engineers weep with envy. But it wasn't just the size that left the expedition team speechless. These blocks weren't rough-hewn chunks of stone that had been roughly fitted together. They were perfectly rectangular, with sharp, clean edges and flat surfaces that looked as though they had been cut by some sort of precision machinery. The kind of precision you'd expect from a modern stone-cutting facility, not from some ancient civilization working with primitive tools. As the team stood there, dwarfed by the immensity of what they were looking at, they began to notice other peculiarities. The most immediately obvious was the effect the structure had on their navigation equipment. Compasses, which had been working perfectly fine throughout their journey, began acting erratically the moment they approached the megaliths. One by one, team members pulled out their compasses and conducted the same experiment. They would hold the compass steady, approach the wall, and watch as the needle swung wildly away from magnetic north. Step back from the structure, and the compass would immediately return to normal function. Move close again, and the needle would swing away once more, as though the very stones themselves were interfering with the Earth's magnetic field. This wasn't just one faulty compass, mind you. Every single navigation device they had brought with them exhibited the same bizarre behavior. It was as though the megaliths were generating some sort of magnetic field strong enough to override the natural magnetic properties that compasses rely on to function. But the magnetic anomalies were just the beginning. As the team conducted a more detailed examination of the individual blocks, they noticed something even more disturbing. Many of the stones showed clear signs of exposure to extreme heat. There were burn marks, areas where the granite had been partially melted, and what appeared to be scorch patterns across the surface of multiple blocks. Now, this is Siberia we're talking about, one of the coldest regions on Earth. The idea that these stones had been subjected to temperatures high enough to melt granite in this environment was absolutely baffling. Granite melts at temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees Celsius. What on earth could have generated that kind of heat in the middle of frozen Siberia? The burn patterns weren't random either. They appeared to be concentrated in specific areas, as though whatever had caused them had been applied deliberately rather than occurring through some natural process. It looked, for all the world, like evidence of advanced metallurgy or some sort of high-temperature industrial process. By this point, every single piece of evidence the expedition had gathered pointed towards one inescapable conclusion. These weren't natural rock formations that happened to look geometric. These were engineered structures built with purpose and precision by some intelligence that possessed capabilities far beyond anything we associate with ancient civilizations. But therein lay the problem. The individual blocks that made up this structure weren't just large. They were impossibly large. We're talking about stones that weighed 3,000 to 4,000 tons each. To put that in perspective, the largest stones used in the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh approximately 80 tons, and we're still not entirely certain how the ancient Egyptians managed to move those. The heaviest stones that we know for certain were moved by ancient humans are found at Baalbek in Lebanon. The famous stone of the pregnant woman, one of the largest quarried stones in known history, weighs in at just over 1,000 tons. Even with all our modern engineering capabilities, moving a stone of that size would be a monumental undertaking, requiring specialized equipment and extensive planning. But the blocks at Gornaya Shoria are 3 to 4 times heavier than that. We talking about stones so massive that even our most powerful modern cranes would struggle to lift them. The largest mobile crane in the world, the Liebherr LTM 11,200 to 9.1, has a maximum lifting capacity of 1,200 tons under ideal conditions. The stones in Siberia exceed even that capacity. So how exactly were these blocks not only quarried and shaped with such precision, but also transported to a mountain peak 4,000 meters above sea level and assembled into a wall that stretches nearly 4,000 feet into the sky? It's a question that modern engineering simply cannot answer using any known ancient techniques. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community, though you wouldn't know it from the official response. Rather than launching major research initiatives or organizing international expeditions to study what could potentially be the most significant archaeological discovery in human history, the academic establishment largely chose to ignore the findings altogether. This silence wasn't accidental. In the world of archaeology and anthropology, career advancement depends largely on staying within established parameters of acceptable research, suggesting that ancient humans might have possessed capabilities far beyond what current historical models allow is a quick way to find yourself ostracized by your peers and cut off from research funding. It's more important, you see, for scientists to appear logical and reasonable than it is for them to actually pursue logical and reasonable explanations for phenomena that don't fit neatly into existing theories. The result is a kind of academic paralysis, where genuinely revolutionary discoveries are dismissed or ignored because they threaten too many established reputations and theories. 4 years after Sidorov's expedition, the Gornaya Shoria megaliths remained largely unknown to the English-speaking world. Russian researchers and enthusiasts discussed the findings on forums and websites, but language barriers prevented the story from gaining wider international attention. That all changed when an American researcher named John Jensen stumbled across discussions of the megaliths on Russian language forums. Jensen, who had been studying anomalous archaeological sites around the world, immediately recognized the significance of what he was looking at. He began translating the available information and compiling photographs that had been posted by members of Sidorov's expedition. In his analysis, Jensen coined the term supermegaliths to describe the Siberian structures, emphasizing that they represented something entirely beyond the scope of any known ancient construction techniques. He estimated that some of the individual blocks could weigh as much as 4,000 tons, making them by far the largest worked stones ever discovered. The photographs Jensen compiled and shared told a story that words alone could not convey. Images of expedition members standing next to individual blocks drove home the sheer scale of what they were looking at. A grown man, standing at full height, barely reached the midpoint of a single stone block. The precision of the cuts, the geometric perfection of the angles, the way the blocks fitted together with almost no visible gaps. It all pointed towards a level of engineering sophistication that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. But Jensen's work also highlighted another crucial aspect of the mystery. The material from which these blocks were constructed was granite, one of the hardest and most difficult stones to work with using primitive tools. Granite requires specialized equipment to cut cleanly, and shaping blocks of this size to such precise specifications would challenge even modern stone-cutting facilities. Yet here were hundreds of these perfectly shaped granite blocks, assembled with a precision that would be impressive even by today's standards. The implications were staggering. Either some ancient civilization had possessed stoneworking technology that we've somehow lost track of, or we need to completely reconsider our understanding of what was possible in the distant past. Of course, when Jensen first began sharing his findings with the broader archaeological community, he encountered significant skepticism. The early internet was full of hoaxed photographs and fabricated stories about archaeological discoveries. Giant skeletons, ancient alien artifacts, lost civilizations. The online world was awash with sensationalized claims that inevitably turned out to be elaborate pranks or misidentifications. Many researchers initially lumped Jensen's work in with these internet hoaxes, dismissing the Gornaya Shoria photographs as clever digital manipulations designed to generate attention and website traffic. The claims seemed too extraordinary to be real, and the images themselves were so dramatic that they almost seemed too good to be true. But there was one crucial difference between the Siberian megaliths and the countless hoaxed archaeological discoveries that had come before. Unlike fabricated giant skeletons or alien artifacts, the Gornaya Shoria wall was a physical structure that existed in a specific, verifiable location. As GPS technology and satellite imagery became more widely available, independent researchers were able to locate the structures using publicly available mapping services. Today, if you know the coordinates, you can find the Gornaya Shoria megaliths on Google Maps. You can see satellite imagery of the structures from space. You can trace the outline of the wall as it winds across the Siberian mountainside. There's no denying that something extraordinary exists at that location, regardless of what explanation you might prefer for how it came to be there. This verifiability should have sparked an immediate international research effort. Major universities should have been organizing expeditions. Government archaeological departments should have been allocating resources to study what could potentially rewrite our understanding of human history. International archaeological societies should have been coordinating research initiatives to unlock the secrets of these mysterious structures. Instead, The response has been virtual silence. In the more than 10 years since Jensen first brought the Siberian megaliths to international attention, there have been no major archaeological missions to the site. No comprehensive surveys have been conducted. No detailed analyses of the stone composition, cutting techniques, or construction methods have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Most tellingly, the vast majority of academic archaeologists who have commented on the structures have done so remotely, offering theories about natural geological processes without ever having visited the site or conducted hands-on examinations of the blocks themselves. It is as though the entire archaeological establishment has collectively decided that if they ignore the Gornaya Shoria megaliths long enough, they'll simply cease to be a problem. This institutional silence has forced independent researchers and enthusiasts to develop their own theories about what the structures represent and how they came to exist. Without official academic guidance or comprehensive scientific analysis, the discussion has moved into the realm of speculation and hypothesis, with various camps advocating for radically different explanations. The first, and perhaps most intuitive theory, comes directly from the local population of Siberia. For generations, the indigenous peoples of the region have maintained that the structures are remnants of an ancient civilization of giants. This isn't just modern folklore either. The stories are deeply embedded in the cultural mythology of the area, passed down through centuries of oral tradition. According to these local legends, the giants were called Tar, and they were the ancestors of the Tatar, peoples who still live in parts of modern Russia. These weren't just slightly larger humans, but genuine giants who coexisted with regular-sized people in the distant past. The stories describe beings who were capable of moving massive stones as easily as ordinary humans might move pebbles, and who built enormous structures that served as fortifications, temples, and cities. The appeal of the giants' theory is its simplicity. When faced with structures that seem too large to have been built by ordinary humans, the most straightforward explanation is that they were built by extraordinary humans. If the blocks are too heavy for normal people to move, then they must have been moved by people who were much stronger and larger than normal. Depictions of these legendary giants appear throughout the art and folklore of the region. Ancient carvings, traditional songs, and ceremonial objects all reference beings of enormous size and strength who once dominated the Siberian landscape. Some of these depictions show giants working alongside ordinary humans, while others portray them as a separate and distinct people with their own culture and civilization. But are these stories based on historical reality, or are they simply the kind of mythological explanations that human cultures develop to make sense of phenomena they otherwise understand? The scientific community has long dismissed the giant theory as pure folklore, pointing out that no fossil evidence has ever been found to support the existence of humanoid beings significantly larger than modern humans. However, the discovery of the Denisovans in 2010 has forced archaeologists to reconsider what they thought they knew about human evolution and the diversity of ancient humanoid species. The Denisovans were not only previously unknown to science, but they were also significantly larger than other humanoid species of their era. The average Denisovan stood nearly 8 feet tall, making them genuine giants by the standards of their time. Some researchers have speculated that the Denisovans and the legendary Tartarians might be one and the same. Perhaps the stories of giants that developed in Siberian folklore were based on genuine historical encounters with these larger humanoid beings. Over thousands of years of oral transmission, the stories might have become exaggerated and mythologized, but they could still retain kernels of historical truth. The idea isn't entirely far-fetched when you consider the broader context of prehistoric life on Earth. Throughout most of Earth's history, many species were significantly larger than their modern descendants. Prehistoric sharks were massive, compared to today's great whites. Ancient crocodiles were enormous compared to their modern counterparts. Giant prehistoric birds dwarfed any flying creature alive today. Yet for some reason, we tend to assume that human ancestors followed a completely different evolutionary path, gradually increasing in size over time rather than decreasing from some prehistoric peak. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if, like so many other species, early humans included varieties that were much larger than anything we see today? The fossil record is notoriously incomplete, particularly when it comes to humanoid species. Bones decompose, are scattered by scavengers, or are buried under geological formations that make discovery unlikely. It's entirely possible that entire branches of the human family tree remain undiscovered, including varieties that were significantly larger than anything we currently know about. If such beings did exist, the Gornaya Shoria region would be exactly the kind of place where evidence of their civilization might be preserved. The extreme cold acts as a natural preservative. The remote location protects sites from human interference, and the geological stability of the area means that ancient structures would be less likely to be destroyed by earthquakes or other natural disasters. The problem with the giant theory, of course, is that it requires accepting that an entire branch of human evolution has somehow escaped detection by modern science. While the discovery of the Denisovans proves that such oversights are possible, the scale of what we're talking about with the Gornaya Shoria builders would be unprecedented. To construct walls using 4,000-ton blocks, you'd need beings who were not just tall, but proportionally strong enough to handle stones that would challenge even our largest modern machinery. We're talking about humanoid creatures who would need to be larger than most dinosaurs, with corresponding strength and engineering capabilities. Moreover, if such beings existed and possessed the technological sophistication necessary to quarry, shape, and transport massive granite blocks, where are the other signs of their civilization? Where are their tools, their art, their burial sites, their smaller, everyday artifacts? Major civilizations don't just disappear without leaving extensive archaeological evidence behind. Yet the Siberian region has produced remarkably little archaeological evidence of any advanced ancient civilization, giant or otherwise. Apart from the megaliths themselves, there are no corresponding discoveries of giant tools, giant dwellings, or giant burial sites that would support the existence of a civilization capable of constructing such massive structures. This absence of supporting evidence has led many researchers to conclude that while the giant theory might be appealing in its simplicity, it requires too many assumptions that aren't supported by the broader archaeological record. If giants built the Gornaya Shoria wall, they did so while leaving remarkably little other evidence of their existence. The second major theory attempting to explain the Siberian megaliths focuses not on the size of their builders, but on the sophistication of their technology. According to this advanced ancients hypothesis, the structures were built not by giants, but by human civilizations that possessed technological capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology attributes to ancient peoples. This theory suggests that at some point in the distant past, human civilizations developed advanced machinery and engineering techniques that enabled them to quarry, transport, and assemble massive stone blocks with precision that rivals or exceeds modern capabilities. These weren't primitive peoples working with rope and wooden rollers, but sophisticated societies with access to technologies that we've somehow lost or forgotten. The appeal of the advanced ancients theory is that it does unrequire us to postulate the existence of any unknown species of giant humanoids. Regular-sized humans, equipped with sufficiently advanced technology, could theoretically accomplish everything we see. The question becomes not whether such construction was possible, but what kind of technology would be required to make it possible. One of the leading proponents of this theory is researcher Graham Hancock, who has spent decades investigating anomalous archaeological sites around the world. While Hancock hasn't specifically focused on the Gornaya Shoria, his broader work on what he calls the ancient apocalypse provides a theoretical framework that could explain their existence. According to Hancock's hypothesis, human civilization is much older and was once much more advanced than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. Rather than following a simple linear progression from primitive stone tools to modern technology, human societies have experienced multiple cycles of advancement and decline over hundreds of thousands of years. The most recent of these cycles, according to Hancock, came to an end approximately 12,800 years ago, when a cataclysmic event, possibly a massive comet impact or global flood, wiped out most traces of advanced prehistoric civilizations. The survivors of this catastrophe were forced to rebuild human society from scratch, but they retained some knowledge and some structures from the more advanced period. This would explain why we find evidence of sophistication engineering at sites like the Egyptian pyramids, Baalbek in Lebanon, and potentially the Gornaya Shoria megaliths, while also explaining why these achievements seem so far beyond the capabilities of the societies that are officially credited with creating them. The builders weren't the primitive peoples that mainstream archaeology associates with these time periods, but the remnants of much more advanced civilizations that had been devastated by global catastrophe. The advanced ancients theory has several advantages over the giant hypothesis. First, it doesn't require us to postulate the existence of unknown humanoid species for which we have no fossil evidence. Second, it provides a coherent explanation for why we find evidence of advanced engineering capabilities at multiple ancient sites around the world, rather than just in Siberia. The theory also aligns with certain archaeological anomalies that mainstream science has difficulty explaining. The precision of the stonework at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, the mathematical sophistication embedded in the design of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the astronomical alignments of ancient structures around the world, all suggest levels of knowledge and capability that seem inconsistent with what we know about the societies that supposedly built them. Moreover, the cataclysmic event that supposedly ended this advanced period isn't pure speculation. There is substantial geological and archaeological evidence that something dramatic happened to Earth's climate and ecosystems around 12,800 years ago. Ice core data shows rapid climate changes. Extinction patterns indicate that many large mammal species disappeared suddenly, and flood myths appear in the cultural traditions of societies around the world. The question is whether this evidence supports Hancock's specific claim that an advanced human civilization was destroyed in the process. Mainstream science acknowledges that significant environmental changes occurred during this period, but attributes them to natural climate fluctuations at the end of the last ice age, rather than to the destruction of sophisticated human societies. The problem with the advanced ancients theory from a scientific perspective is that it requires accepting a version of human history for which there is remarkably little direct evidence. If advanced civilizations existed tens of thousands of years ago, where are their cities? Where are their roads? Their harbors? Their industrial sites? Where are the accumulated artifacts that any advanced society would leave behind over thousands of years of existence? Hancock and other proponents of the theory argue that most evidence of these civilizations would have been destroyed by the same cataclysmic events that ended them, or that it lies buried beneath hundreds of feet of sediment or underwater due to rising sea levels since the end of the Ice Age. While this is theoretically possible, it makes the hypothesis difficult to test or verify using standard archaeological methods. The theory also faces the challenge of explaining how such advanced technology could be completely lost. Modern industrial civilization depends on vast networks of knowledge, infrastructure, and specialized expertise. If a global catastrophe destroyed our civilization today, it's difficult to imagine how future survivors could lose all knowledge of engineering or basic scientific principles. Yet, the advanced ancients theory requires that entire technological traditions vanished so completely that no trace of them survived in the historical record. While catastrophic events could certainly destroy physical infrastructure, the complete disappearance of knowledge and techniques seems much less plausible, especially if significant populations survived the initial disaster. Despite these challenges, the advanced ancients theory continues to attract supporters, particularly among researchers who are frustrated with mainstream archaeology's reluctance to seriously investigate anomalous sites like Gornaya Shoria. The theory provides a framework for understanding these sites that doesn't require supernatural explanations or the existence of unknown species, while still acknowledging that they represent something genuinely extraordinary. The third major theory, attempting to explain the Siberian megaliths, is, perhaps predictably, the ancient aliens hypothesis. According to proponents of this theory, the structures were built not by human beings at all, but by extraterrestrial visitors who possessed technology far beyond anything available to ancient human civilizations. The alien theory has become something of a default explanation for any archaeological anomaly that seems to exceed the capabilities of ancient humans. Massive stone structures. Aliens built them. Precise astronomical alignments. Aliens designed them. Advanced mathematical knowledge. Aliens taught it. The approach has become so common that it's almost reflexive in certain circles. In the case of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths, alien theorists point to the same evidence that supports other hypotheses: the massive size of the blocks, the precision of their cutting and placement, the apparent technological sophistication required for construction, but interpret this evidence as proof of extraterrestrial intervention rather than human achievement. The appeal of the alien theory is that it provides a simple solution to the problem of explaining capabilities that seem beyond ancient human technology. If humans couldn't have built these structures, then non-humans must have built them. Since we have no evidence of non-human terrestrial species with advanced engineering capabilities, the builders must have been extraterrestrial. The theory also has the advantage of being essentially unfalsifiable. If there's no physical evidence of alien visitors, that's because they left when their work was completed. If there are no alien artifacts to be found, that's because they took their technology with them. If local populations have no legends or traditions referring to alien contact, that's because the contact occurred too long ago to be remembered, or because the aliens deliberately concealed their involvement. This unfalsifiability is actually one of the major scientific problems with the alien hypothesis. In science, a good theory needs to make specific, testable predictions that could potentially be proven wrong. The alien theory, as typically formulated, makes no such predictions. It simply attributes any unexplained phenomenon to extraterrestrial intervention, without providing any means of testing or verifying that attribution. Moreover, the alien theory often rests on problematic assumptions about the capabilities of ancient human civilizations. It assumes that our ancestors were primitive and technologically limited, incapable of sophisticated engineering or advanced problem-solving. But this assumption isn't necessarily supported by the archaeological evidence. Human beings 20,000 years ago had the same basic cognitive capabilities that we have today. They had the same capacity for abstract reasoning, the same ability to learn and innovate, and the same potential for technological development. The main differences between ancient and modern humans aren't cognitive, but rather cumulative. Weavy had more time to build on previous discoveries, and Weavy developed systems for preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations. Given sufficient motivation, resources, and time, there's no reason to assume that ancient humans couldn't have developed techniques for moving massive stones, cutting precise angles, or constructing enormous structures. The fact that we don't fully understand how they accomplished these feats doesn't necessarily mean they needed extraterrestrial assistance. The alien theory also fails to address some basic logical questions about why extraterrestrial visitors would engage in massive construction projects on Earth. If aliens possessed technology advanced enough to travel between stars, why would they need to build walls or monuments using stone blocks? What possible purpose could such structures serve for beings with access to space-age technology? Even more puzzling is why these hypothetical alien visitors would choose such a remote and inaccessible location for their construction project. If the Gornaya Shoria wall was built as some sort of monument or landmark, why place it on a mountain peak in one of the most isolated regions on Earth, where virtually no one would ever see it? The alien theory also lacks support from the local cultural traditions of the region. Unlike the giant theory, which is deeply embedded in Siberian folklore and mythology, there are no local legends or traditions that refer to contact with extraterrestrial beings. If aliens had built such a massive structure in the area, you'd expect some memory of their presence to have been preserved in local oral traditions. Perhaps most problematically, the alien theory tends to rob ancient human civilizations of credit for their genuine achievements by attributing every impressive ancient structure to extraterrestrial intervention. The hypothesis effectively denies that our ancestors were capable of sophisticated engineering, advanced mathematics, or innovative problems. This perspective not only underestimates ancient human capabilities, but it also perpetuates a kind of cultural chauvinism that assumes modern Western technological approaches represent the only possible path to advanced engineering. Perhaps ancient civilizations developed techniques and approaches that we've forgotten or never discovered, rather than requiring alien assistance to accomplish their goals. Despite these logical and evidentiary problems, the alien theory continues to attract supporters, particularly among those who are dissatisfied with mainstream archaeological explanations, but find the giant and advanced ancient theorists equally implausible. The appeal is understandable if neither known human capabilities nor hypothetical lost civilizations can explain structures like the Gornaya Shoria, then perhaps the explanation lies outside terrestrial possibilities altogether. However, the scientific consensus remains that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the alien hypothesis for ancient structures lacks the kind of concrete, verifiable evidence that would be needed to support such a radical conclusion about human history and extraterrestrial contact. This brings us to the fourth, and, from a mainstream scientific perspective, most credible theory about the Gornaya Shoria. According to geologists and earth scientists, the structures are not artificial constructions at all, but rather natural rock formations that have been shaped by geological processes over millions of years. This natural formation theory acknowledges that the structures are genuinely impressive and that their geometric regularity is genuinely unusual, but argues that nature is capable of producing remarkably regular and seemingly artificial-looking formations through entirely natural processes. The scientific explanation begins with the recognition that geometric shapes and regular patterns are actually quite common in nature. Crystal formations naturally develop regular geometric structures. Basalt columns, formed by cooling lava, often create hexagonal patterns that look almost artificial. Sedimentary rock formations can develop regular layering that creates the appearance of constructed walls or buildings. In the case of the Gornaya Shoria megaliths, geologists point to a process called jointing, where rocks develop regular crack patterns due to stress, temperature changes, and other geological forces. Over time, these cracks can be widened and deepened by water erosion, wind erosion, and freeze-thaw cycles, ultimately separating what was once a solid rock formation into individual blocks. The process is entirely natural, but it can produce results that look remarkably artificial. The blocks maintain their geometric regularity because they're all part of the same original rock formation, subject to the same geological stresses and erosion patterns. The precision of their shapes comes not from human or alien engineering, but from the uniform way that natural forces act on homogeneous rock formations. According to this theory, what visitors to the Gornaya Shoria site are seeing is not a constructed wall, but rather a mountain or rock formation that has been naturally eroded in such a way that it resembles a constructed wall. The individual blocks are simply sections of the original formation that have been separated by natural jointing and erosion processes. This explanation has the significant advantage of not requiring any extraordinary assumptions about ancient human capabilities, lost civilizations, or extraterrestrial intervention. It explains the structures using geological processes that are known to occur in mountainous regions around the world. The natural formation theory also explains some of the more puzzling aspects of the site that other theories struggle with. The magnetic anomalies detected by Sidorov's expedition, for instance, could be explained by natural mineral deposits in the rock that create local variations in magnetic field strength. Such anomalies are not uncommon in areas with significant iron, or deposits, or other magnetic minerals. Similarly, the evidence of extreme heat exposure on some of the blocks could be explained by natural processes rather than ancient technology. Lightning strikes, forest fires, or even geological processes involving friction and pressure could potentially create the kind of burn marks and partial melting observed at the site. From a geological perspective, the Gornaya Shoria region is exactly the kind of place where such natural formations might be expected to occur. The area is geologically active, with significant tectonic forces that could create the stress patterns necessary for regular joint. The climate is harsh enough to create significant freeze-thaw cycles that could widen cracks and separate blocks over time. Moreover, when viewed from a broader perspective using satellite imagery, the structures do appear more like natural mountain formations than constructed walls. The overall shape and layout of the site is consistent with natural erosion patterns, even if individual sections look remarkably artificial when examined up close. The natural formation theory also explains why there is no corresponding archaeological evidence of the civilization that would have been necessary to construct such massive structures. There are no giant tools, no quarry sites, no construction camps, no burial grounds, because no construction actually took place. The structures simply developed naturally over geological timescales. However, the natural formation theory faces one significant challenge that its proponents have difficulty explaining. At the base of one of the main megalithic formations, there is what appears to be a perfectly rectangular opening that looks for all the world like a deliberately constructed doorway. Natural rock formations can certainly develop cave openings, gaps between blocks, and other irregular spaces, but they don't typically develop perfectly rectangular openings with clean, straight edges that are precisely sized and positioned to serve as gateways. The doorway at Gornaya Shoria is too regular, too purposeful looking. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!